Eleanor woke up to the faint sound of sparrows chirping outside her window. The early morning light slipped through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls of her small kitchen. She lay still for a moment, listening to the hush of the house around her, a quiet so deep it almost felt like an extra presence. At 78, mornings had become both a comfort and a curse. Comfort, because they brought the familiar rhythm she had built over the years. A curse, because each new day seemed to underline the echoing loneliness that filled her little home since her husband, Arthur, had passed 5 years ago. She finally pushed herself up, slipping her feet into her old, worn slippers. The floor was cool against her skin as she shuffled to the kitchen. Her fingers brushed against the faded edges of family photos on the hallway wall, snapshots of summers long gone, birthdays celebrated, and Arthur holding their daughter as a baby. In the kitchen, she turned on the small radio sitting by the window. A cheerful tune spilled out, but it felt out of place against the heavy quiet of the room. Eleanor reached for her favorite blue mug, chipped along the rim but still holding the warmth of countless morning teas. She brewed her tea slowly, her movements careful and precise, as though each step had been rehearsed 1,000 times. Then came her ritual, the eggs. She cracked 2 into a bowl, the shells making a crisp, satisfying sound. She didn't bother checking if they were fresh, she never had. Into the pan they went, sizzling quickly in a pool of oil that she always poured generously. "Protein keeps me going," she often said to her daughter on their rare Sunday calls. But today, as the eggs hissed and spat, Eleanor suddenly remembered the doctor's gentle warning from last week: as we get older, we need to be extra careful with food safety. Undercooked eggs and too much oil can cause serious trouble for seniors. Small mistakes can become big problems. She had nodded then, but in truth, she hadn't listened. Change felt heavy at her age. Her eggs, greasy, undercooked, and overly salted, felt like one of the last links to her old life, to mornings spent laughing across the kitchen table with Arthur, to moments when she still felt needed. She slid the eggs onto her plate, watching the yolk wobble slightly, still underdone. The smell filled the kitchen, and for a moment, she closed her eyes, imagining Arthur's voice teasing her about her famous sloppy eggs. Eleanor sat down, her hands wrapped around the blue mug. The chair across from her remained empty, as it had for years. Her heart tightened, the loneliness creeping in through the walls like a cold draft. She took a slow breath and picked up her fork, unaware that today was about to bring an unexpected knock, and with it, a new chapter she had never imagined. Eleanor had barely taken 2 bites when a sudden knock startled her. The fork clattered against her plate, echoing in the quiet room. She set her mug down carefully and listened. Another knock came, gentle yet persistent. She hesitated, her mind racing through possibilities. It wasn't Sunday, her daughter wouldn't be visiting. The mailman usually left packages by the door. Who could it be? She slowly pushed back her chair and made her way to the door, her steps cautious. Peeking through the small window, she saw a familiar face, Ben, the young man from next door. Ben was in his early 20s, a college student who had moved in with his grandmother a few years ago. After she passed, he decided to stay in the house rather than move away, saying it felt like home. Eleanor had watched him grow up from afar, and over the years, he had become like a grandson she never had. She opened the door, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Morning, Ben," she said, her voice warm but tinged with surprise. "Morning, Miss Eleanor." He replied, holding up a carton of eggs like a prize. "Look what I picked up from the farmer's market this morning. I thought you might like some fresh eggs." She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Oh, Ben, you didn't have to go out of your way for me." "It's no trouble," he said quickly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I saw you struggling with groceries last week and figured you might need a hand. And besides, these eggs are from free-range chickens, much safer and tastier than store-bought." Eleanor looked at the carton in his hands, her eyes flickering with both gratitude and reluctance. "My old eggs are just fine," she insisted gently. But Ben wasn't deterred. He glanced at her plate and noticed the runny yolks and sheen of oil. His brow furrowed slightly, but he kept his tone light. "You know, my grandma used to make eggs just like that. She always said they tasted better that way. But after she got food poisoning one winter, we all learned to be extra careful. It's easy to overlook little things like oil or undercooked yolks, but they can really hurt you, especially as we get older." Eleanor's eyes softened. She studied Ben's earnest face, his concern shining through every word. It wasn't a lecture, it was kindness wrapped in gentle honesty. "I didn't realize it could be that serious," she admitted, her voice small, almost ashamed. Ben smiled reassuringly. "That's okay. Most people don't. How about this? Tomorrow, I come over, and we cook together. I can show you a few tricks my grandma taught me. No pressure, just a fun little cooking session." Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a burden or a forgotten elder. She felt seen, cared for, and perhaps, even needed. "That sounds lovely," she said at last, her eyes glistening. Ben nodded, his grin wide and boyish. "It's a date then. Tomorrow morning." As he left, Eleanor watched him from the doorway, the carton of fresh eggs still cradled in her arms. The house felt different now, as if a tiny sunbeam had slipped inside and started to melt the frost that had built up around her heart. The next morning, Eleanor found herself waking up with a rare flutter of excitement. The house felt different, as if it had taken a deep breath overnight. She smoothed down her floral apron, the one she hadn't worn since Arthur's birthday breakfast years ago. At exactly 9 o'clock, Ben knocked on the door. Eleanor opened it with a shy smile. "Come in, chef," she teased, stepping aside to let him in. Ben entered carrying a small bag of groceries, fresh herbs, a bottle of olive oil, and a small carton of salt labeled low sodium. He set everything on her kitchen counter and rolled up his sleeves, ready for action. "All right, Ms. Eleanor, today we're going to make scrambled eggs that are soft, fully cooked, and much healthier. Are you ready?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Eleanor chuckled, shaking her head. "You make it sound like we're performing a grand symphony," she said, but inside, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. Ben started by cracking an egg into a small glass bowl. "First rule, always crack your eggs into a separate bowl before putting them in the pan. That way, if it's bad, you won't ruin the whole dish." Eleanor watched, fascinated. "I've never done that," she admitted, her hands hovering over her own bowl. "Want to try?" Ben offered. Eleanor took a deep breath, cracked an egg, and was surprised when it slipped cleanly into the bowl. She looked up at Ben with a proud grin, like a schoolgirl receiving her first gold star. "Perfect," he cheered, giving her a gentle high five. Next, Ben showed her how to check eggs for freshness by placing them in a bowl of water. Eleanor gasped as one floated to the top. "Oh my goodness! I've been eating that," she exclaimed, her eyes wide. Ben laughed. "Yep. If it floats, it's time to toss it. But don't worry, you're learning now." They continued cooking, with Ben showing her how to use a drizzle of olive oil instead of a pool of heavy cooking oil. "Olive oil is healthier, and you only need a little," he explained. As they stirred the eggs gently over low heat, Eleanor shared stories about Arthur and how he loved big Sunday breakfasts. She told Ben about the time Arthur had burned the toast so badly the smoke alarm went off, and how they both laughed until they cried. Ben listened intently, occasionally chuckling and adding a pinch of salt here, a dash of pepper there. He didn't rush her stories. He just let her talk, filling the kitchen with warmth and laughter that had been missing for too long. When the eggs were finally done, fluffy and golden, they plated them together. Eleanor took her first bite, her eyes widening with surprise. "These are delicious," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. Ben raised his fork in a small toast. To new traditions, he said, smiling. Eleanor tapped her fork against his, her eyes shining. To new traditions, she echoed. In that moment, Eleanor realized this wasn't just about eggs or health. It was about connection, about allowing herself to learn and grow, and about opening her heart to kindness, even after so many years. A week later, Eleanor's kitchen looked almost unrecognizable. The old greasy pans had been scrubbed until they gleamed, and fresh herbs now sat in a little pot on the windowsill, their bright green leaves catching the morning sun. The radio played softly, but this time the music seemed to fit the gentle buzz of life filling her home. Today wasn't just another quiet morning. Eleanor had invited a few neighbors over for breakfast. It had been years since she'd hosted anyone. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the plates, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there in a long time. When the doorbell rang, Eleanor took a deep breath and opened it to find Mrs. Jenkins from across the street, Mr. Patel from the corner house, and sweet young Clara with her mother. Their faces lit up as they stepped inside, taking in the smell of fresh herbs and warm eggs. Eleanor. This looks wonderful. Mrs. Jenkins exclaimed, her eyes wide. I thought it was time I stopped hiding away, Eleanor replied, her voice steady but emotional. And I wanted to share something new I've learned, a healthier way to enjoy our favorite breakfast. She guided them to the table, where platters of fluffy scrambled eggs, lightly toasted whole grain bread, and a fresh fruit salad waited. There were no greasy pools of oil, no half-cooked yolks, just wholesome, carefully prepared food. Ben soon arrived, carrying an extra basket of strawberries. He beamed when he saw Eleanor bustling around confidently, greeting each guest like an old friend. Look at you, Ms. Eleanor. You're a natural hostess, he said, handing her the basket. She laughed, a deep, joyful sound that turned every head. All thanks to my new kitchen coach, she teased, giving him a light pat on the arm. As everyone dug into their breakfast, conversation flowed easily. They shared stories of old family recipes, swapped gardening tips, and even planned a small neighborhood potluck for the following month. Eleanor's daughter, Laura, arrived a little later. She paused at the doorway, her eyes misting over as she watched her mother laughing with neighbors, her face radiant and alive. Mom, what's all this? Laura asked, setting down her purse and stepping forward. Eleanor turned, her eyes glistening. Oh, just a small breakfast gathering. You know, I've been learning a few new things lately, she said with a shy but proud smile. Laura hugged her tightly, feeling the strength and warmth in her mother's embrace. You seem so different. Happier. Eleanor nodded against her daughter's shoulder. I realized I didn't have to hold on to old habits just because I was afraid. Change isn't so scary when you have someone kind by your side. Laura pulled back to look into her mother's eyes, tears shimmering. I'm so proud of you, Mom. Eleanor glanced around the lively room, her heart swelling. For the first time in years, her house felt like a true home again, filled with warmth, laughter, and new memories. As she sat down to finish her plate, she realized the real nourishment wasn't just in the eggs or the healthy choices. It was in the friendships, the shared laughter, and the unexpected courage to start again.